name's Jasmine. I'm part of the Foster and Connections team. I'm going to be talking to you about foster care today, but just bearing in mind that the information that we talk about today is relevant to Victorian foster care. So if you're joining from somewhere interstate or international, the information might be slightly different. Before we begin, I just want to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people who are the traditional custodians of the land that I'm streaming from today. I pay my respects to elders past, present and future of the Kulin Nations, and I'd like to extend my respects to other Indigenous Australians who may be joining us today. Sovereignty was never ceded, always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So what is Foster and Connections? We are the Victorian statewide recruitment service. So we are here to provide information to people looking to learn more about foster care. We can help with providing the public information, which is what we're here for today. And I can help you decide if foster care is right for you. If you'd like to call us on our inquiry line, the number for that is 1800 13088, or you can visit fosteringconnections.com.au. So a little bit about myself. I've worked in foster care for over 3 years now. I've worked directly with prospective and accredited foster carers over that time. And now at Foster and Connections, I work with people who are interested in figuring out if foster care is right for them and learning about what the next steps are. So if you're interested in learning more about foster care, I'm hoping that today can help provide some answers for you for any questions that you might have. So if we start with what is foster care? Back to basics. Foster care is the temporary care of children and young people by members of the community who have become trained and accredited as foster carers. So foster care is all about looking after and supporting vulnerable kids between the ages of 0 to 18. So they can be babies, they can be teenagers, anything in between, who are unable to live at home or with other family members. In most cases, when a child or young person first comes into foster care, the aim is to support the parents to have their children or young people return to their care as soon as it's safely possible to do so. So foster carers play a really key role in supporting families where it's possible for children to go home. Sometimes care can be a little bit longer than that, and I'll talk to you about the different types of care moving forward today. So there are currently about 11,000 children in foster care or home-based care in Victoria as of June 2019. And there are about 1,500 Victorian children and there's about 11,000 children in home-based care in Australia and 1,500 in Victoria in foster care. So it is the temporary care of children, as I mentioned, by members of the community. So where there's family members or children or people that are connected to the children in other ways that are unable to put their hand up, that's when members of the community will put their hand up and take care of those young people. So sometimes it can be for a few days, sometimes it's a little bit longer. And it really depends on the circumstances of the child, but that can be up to the foster carer to decide how long they're able to care for that child as well. So when we think about the children that are in foster care, they are usually children who are likely to have faced challenges within their families. So they're usually, the reasons for that can include neglect or abuse, but also there can be a number of other reasons that children come into care as well. So it's really important that foster carers approach fostering with an open heart and a willingness to understand the child's needs and where they've come from and what they've experienced. As a foster carer, your role is to support them, to show them boundaries, to teach them safety, and to help guide children through the different stages of life. Persistent and consistent care is critical, and your agency will provide support in this, but that's one of the main factors in providing care for children, is making sure that we can keep that as stable and consistent as possible. The foster care agency that you work with, if you become a foster carer, they will always try to match you as best as possible with that foster child. So making sure that it's a good fit for your family, your personal circumstances, and your lifestyle. That's what's going to maintain that stability. You can, of course, find out more about this by going to our website and downloading the information pack, which we will put in the comments underneath this live stream. So who can become a foster carer? So if you're single, if you're partnered, if you live in a share house, if you work full-time or not at all it takes is to have a spare bedroom and to be willing and able to help change a child's life. So if you have a spare bedroom and you're willing to learn and to support a young person, you could be eligible to be a foster carer. Foster carers come from all backgrounds and life stages. Some are, as I mentioned, they are single or they're partnered, same-sex couples, families with children still at home or children who are grown and have left the home. And they come from all different age groups as well. You can foster if you rent or if you own your own home. If you're employed, if you're studying, if you're retired, or if you come from a diverse cultural or religious or ethnic background, you could be eligible to foster. Your ability to model respectful interactions, to have patience, and to model leadership to our kids is really critical to children and young people in care, especially as they might be forming their own identities and need a safe and stable place to do so. So as we wrap up for Trans Awareness Month, we wanted to highlight that many of our children are identify as trans or gender diverse, or come from, or identify as queer as well. So we need carers who are able to support children with individual backgrounds, circumstances, and needs that are specific to them as well. So once you go through the accreditation process, which usually takes about 6 months, you can then choose what type of care you would like to provide. So there are a couple of different types of care that you can put your hand up to provide. There's emergency care, which is usually short notice. There's respite care, which is usually for short periods of time in a planned manner. So usually for a weekend, to give the child's main carers or their parents a bit of a break, and to give the child an opportunity to experience different opportunities and things like that. You can also choose short-term care, which is usually weeks to months, or long-term care, which goes up to a couple of years, or even potentially up until the child is 18 years old or leaves care. So how do you become a foster carer? We at Fostering Connections can help provide information about foster care and answer any questions that you might have. And if you do have any questions today, just pop them in the chat below. We will then refer you on to an agency in your area that can work with you on the process to becoming a foster carer. So here in Victoria, the process of accreditation is going to be relatively the same at any agency that you go through. You will start with a couple of phone interviews and start building a bit of a relationship with the agency that you're going to work with. They'll ask you about your circumstances, about your family, and about the type of care that you are thinking about providing. Then there's some training that you'll need to do. That training is the same for all foster carers in Victoria, and it makes sure that you've got a really good foundation of knowledge to start this process. So making sure that you really understand what it is that children in foster care need, what it is that the agency is looking for from foster carers, and making sure that you understand the commitment that you're making. You'll also have to do a range of background checks. So things like a working with children check and a police check. If you've lived overseas for any period of time, you might have to do an international police check. We'll also do things like health checks and an assessment of your home environment as well. So making sure that things are safe and secure in the physical environment. The training that I mentioned covers off the responsibilities and challenges of being a foster carer. It spans across a number of topics, so things like how to welcome children into your home, some of the common daily experiences that our foster carers talk about, and of course, what it's like to say goodbye at the end of a placement. A lot of people ask, you know, is it really hard to say goodbye at the end of a foster care placement? And of course, sometimes it can be. So your agency is here to support you with that grief process and the end of a placement as well. Finally, you'll do your assessment, where an assessor will come out to your home. They will do some interviews with you face to face and talk to you about how how you respond to specific challenges, your understanding of childhood trauma and what our kids experience, and also things relating to your specific family dynamics and household environment. So really getting to know you quite well and building that relationship between you and the agency, which means that when children are requiring foster care, we've got a really good understanding of who you are and what placement's going to work for you, because we want it to work for the family, excuse me, and the child. Your agency will provide support to you throughout that entire process. So right from the first phone call through to your accreditation, you'll have an agency worker by your side to answer any questions and to support you through that process. You will also then, once you're accredited, be signed up to the Foster Care Association of Victoria, who also provide that extra layer of support to you as a carer. And then, of course, when a placement has been made, when a child comes into your home to stay with you, you also have ongoing contact with their case manager at the agency that you're working with. So lots of support wrapped around you as a foster carer. Your agencies will work really closely with you to make sure that you're ready and that the home is safe and secure. So two sides of it, of course, if your home needs a bit of work, if we need to put in some extra safety functions, then that's something your agency will work on. And your agencies will also provide things like training, advocacy, counselling if you need it. If you're going through any specific challenges or anything like that, they will help in that sense as well. So do we have any questions? It doesn't look like it at this stage. So how long do placements usually last? It can depend on the needs of the child and on their family circumstances. Sometimes foster carers will care for a child. A question has just come through. All right, really good question. So if you commence the application process and then relocate within the next couple of months, does your application transfer to a local agency, or do we need to see out the application process with the agency that signed us up? I'm keen to commence the 6-month application process. However, we will be relocating soon. Thank you. So as I mentioned, the process can take about 6 months to get through. One of the things that your agency will talk to you about is what we call major life changes, or things that are going to come up for you during that assessment process that might make it hard to complete. So we always recommend that you would probably relocate before you start that process, but it doesn't mean that you can't start collecting information and having those initial conversations to get started on the way, and then pick it up and jump feet first when you have moved and you're ready to go. So it does depend on how far away your local agency will be. So if you're moving from one side of the state to the other, it absolutely would be a different agency, but many agencies in Victoria cover a pretty broad area. So it is possible to start that process and then relocate within that area. So if you would like some more information about that, if I can answer any questions in a bit more depth about your personal circumstances, just give us a call on the inquiry line at Fostering Connections. You'll be connected to me. The number is 1800 013 088. Hope that helps. All right, any other questions coming through? All right, so let's jump back to the length of placements. So as I mentioned, the length of placements can vary just depending on what's going on for that specific family at that time. The type of care that you provide, or the length of time that you care for children, is really up to you. So you let your agency know what it is you can commit to, and then they will work around that. And of course, if there's a reason that the agency thinks that you'd be more suitable to a different type of care, they'll provide those recommendations to you as well. So some carers choose to provide just one type of care. Some might provide a combination of care arrangements. And some carers will choose all sorts of care types, but for a specific age range of children, and that's okay as well. So if we think about the different types of foster care, we do have respite care. So as I mentioned, that's a bit more of that sort of planned, reoccurring support to care for children on a pretty consistent basis in a planned manner. So usually it'll be for a weekend once a month, where children who might be in an existing foster care placement, they might come and stay with you for a bit of a break. Or for a week during the school holidays or other times as required. Our respite carers are incredibly important supports for our full-time carers who provide that short and long-term care. So short-term care is usually when children or young people require care from overnight to up to about 6 months. So usually this is children where the plan is for them to be reunified with their parents. So the parents might be doing a little bit of work to make sure that their environment is safe and stable enough for the children to come home. And the foster carer's role in that is to support those children until they're able to go home. Sometimes short-term care is the option for when children are likely to be placed with extended families, so grandmas or grandpas or aunties or uncles, and so foster care placement will just be there to support that family while they can sort out the accommodation that they need to. Long-term care is usually when a child cannot return home for some time. So sometimes that can go on to mean permanent care, which is a slightly different process, or when the child reaches adulthood or becomes independent. So the last type of care is emergency care. So this is where children or young people who need immediate care due to really significant concerns for their safety, and these care options are usually urgent. So there might be really little notice for a placement that's an emergency placement. So you might get a call at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, ready for a placement that night. So it's really important that that those are responded to in a timely manner. So emergency care works really well for people who maybe work from home or who are semi-retired, who have that ability to be flexible during the day and respond to urgent requests as they come up. Does anybody have any questions about the different care types? No? All right. So there's a couple of myths that usually come up with foster care. So I wanted to talk about some of those today. The first thing that I often hear from people on our inquiry line is that they're not sure if they can foster if they're working full-time. So foster carers can work full-time, they can work part-time, you can work casually. Some children do need a full-time stay-at-home carer, especially babies or children under 5. So you can talk to your agency about whether your circumstances and your work commitments will fit for a specific type of care. And then if your circumstances change, you can always change the type of care that you provide as well. Just had a question come through. Is there a cost associated with the police check and medical check, etc.? No, there shouldn't be any costs associated with becoming a foster carer, except for in terms of setting up your home ready for a child to come and stay with you. So the police check will be run by your agency, so they'll support you with that. Usually they'll send you a link or a form to fill in, and you just have to submit that one. In terms of the medical check, if you see a bulk billing doctor, of course, that one will be covered. If you see a private doctor and there's a gap payment, you will be responsible to pay that, but you can just see a bulk billing doctor to get them to sign off on your medical check. So there shouldn't be any costs associated with the application process. It should all be free in Victoria to become a foster carer. All right, so on the same basis as the costs, I'm often asked if you need to own your own home or if you need to have a big house to foster, and the answer is absolutely not. If you're renting, you can absolutely become a foster carer. The only prerequisite in terms of your house size is that there's a spare bedroom for a child or young person to sleep when they come and stay with you. So some agencies may ask that a child or sibling group have their own bedrooms, while others might be happy for children to share rooms if there's enough space to do so. But the requirements are basically that you need to have a spare bed set up for a young person or a child. Sleeping arrangements have to be age appropriate and meet the child's individual needs. So to make sure that we can work out whether your house is going to be suitable to be a foster care, if you've got enough space, again, you can give us a call, but you certainly don't need to own your own home to be a foster carer. You also don't need to be in a relationship or have your own children to become a foster carer. So as I said earlier, foster carers can be married, single, in de facto relationships. You can be any sexuality, any gender or gender identity. We need foster carers from a really diverse, from a really wide variety of backgrounds in order to support the children that come through care, because they all come from diverse backgrounds. You certainly don't need to have parenting experience either. Our kids need foster carers who can provide stability and support, which anybody can provide. And sometimes it can help to not have parenting experience, because the needs of children coming into care can be a little bit different to what maybe you've experienced with parenting your own children. Our kids might not have had really secure attachments, and so they might need you to respond differently in the way that you discipline or provide consequences for behaviours, and in the way that you respond to them in terms of things like physical touch, cuddles and things like that. So not having that experience of your own can really actually be a benefit sometimes. But if you do have children, then that also brings a wide skill set of things you've learned along the way that can help with fostering as well. You'll also receive a lot of training before you become a foster carer. So I mentioned earlier that part of the accreditation process is to undergo some of that training. So we'll work with you to understand how much knowledge you already have about caring for children, and to help you patch up any gaps if there are any. People often ask as well if you can foster if your own children are still at home. And the answer is yes, of course you can. But it's just important to note that children and young people in foster care have really complex needs, and they need a lot of time and attention. So some placements might not be appropriate when you've got children of your own in the home. But on the other hand, a lot of children can benefit from having other kids around that they can play with. They can socialise and develop their skills. They can also learn to build strong relationships with other kids, especially if they're the same age. But again, you'll work with your agency in deciding what type of care will work best for you and your family, and ensure that you're really taking into consideration your own children's needs, as well as any potential foster care placements that you have as well. People often ask me if fostering is the same as adoption, and the answer is no, not exactly. So adoption is where you become the permanent legal guardian of a child or young person. As a foster carer, you will care for a child or young person for a fixed period, with the goal is to reunite the children with their biological families. Excuse me. And in foster care, the child's guardian is defined through court orders and is usually still the department or the birth family rather than the foster carers. So there is a bit of a difference in terms of the legal side of foster care and adoption. And it's really important that people understand that foster care is supposed to be a temporary support for children who are needing support, whereas adoption is a bit more permanent. Do we have any other questions coming through? Doesn't look like it. People often ask about the behaviour of children coming into foster care, children and young people in care. And people often think that our kids in care will have a lot of challenging behaviours. So, of course, most children in foster care have experienced really significant challenges, but they're mostly just like other children. It's really important that you understand that fostering with an open heart and a willingness to understand a child's needs is going to have the greatest outcomes. So it's your role as a foster carer to show support and boundaries and safety to help guide children through different stages and challenges. And the best way to do that and to see less of those sort of challenging behaviours that come from the experiences that our kids have had is through persistent and consistent care. So your agency will provide support with this, as well as ways to manage behaviour if it becomes too challenging for you to cope with, and also strategies to help work on that relationship so that the child feels safe enough to be themselves and to not act out with too many challenging behaviours as well. Another question I often hear is that foster care is a really big commitment and do I have to sign up for years at a time? So you absolutely can put your hand up for long-term care arrangements, as I mentioned, but some people just prefer to commit to a couple of weekends a month with something like respite care, and that's totally okay as well. So the best type of care for each individual will depend on your personal circumstances, and it's likely to change as your situation changes. So if you sign up for respite care and in a couple of months' time you decide you'd like to try long-term care or vice versa, you absolutely can do that. If your work circumstances change or your family situation changes, you can absolutely change the type of care that you would like to provide, and your agency will provide advice and support on the best way to do this. Another question that I often hear on the inquiry line is how much information will you learn about a child before they come into your care? So you can always ask for more information about a child when you get that call to take on a placement to help you prepare. So that can be things including their medical needs, their routines, behavioural needs, their placement history, and the reason that they need a placement with you at this time. And you can also ask to be told about the child's family details, contact arrangements, and how to best support them if they come from a culturally and linguistically diverse background, or excuse me, or other things that you might need to know to take the best care of them. So you can always ask for more information. Sometimes this information can't be provided, so the department might not know, or your agency might not know, but wherever possible, they will provide you with as much information as they can before you take on a placement. I often hear as well that it must be a hard time in fostering with the COVID-19 pandemic. And the answer to that is it absolutely has. So COVID-19 has impacted how we recruit foster carers. So we've obviously moved into a much more of a virtual space like today. So a lot of agencies are doing things like virtual information sessions, whether that's in a group or one-on-one. We can also deliver training online now and do some of your assessment interviews via this sort of virtual platform as well. So it has absolutely changed the way that we recruit foster carers, but it's important to know that you'll still be really well supported by your agency, whether that's in the digital space online or whether it's in person in your home. You'll have a lot of regular contact with the agency that you're working with in terms of recruitment, and once you do become a registered foster carer as well. Oops, sorry. Just jumping back to some of our frequently asked questions. Can you choose the age of children that are placed with you? Of course you can. Some families will have a better dynamic for children who are younger, some older. Some people who work specific jobs might choose an age range that's going to work best within their work schedules. And some families with children at home might choose to care for a specific age around their own children as well. So carers are usually accredited for the ages and genders of children that they've sort of signed up for. And during your assessment process, you can have this conversation about what's going to best suit your circumstances. So many carers will choose to provide foster care to children the same age as their biological children or slightly younger. Excuse me. And your agency will want to match you with a child that's the best fit for your family. So if you say, you know, I only want to care for babies, and maybe you work full time, or your schedule's fixed in other ways, maybe that wouldn't work so well for babies. So your agency might recommend moving to a different age range if that's going to suit your family best. It's really important to note that your age preferences and your gender preferences can be as specific as you like, but the more specific that they are, it might take longer for your agency to provide, to find an appropriate match with the child. So the more specific you are, the harder it might be to find a placement that's going to match. But that's okay. You can always say no to a placement. So if your agency calls you up and asks you if you're able to care for a specific child, you can absolutely have that conversation with them, as long as you're open and honest about what you can and can't accept, when you can and can't accept a child into your home. Many foster carers will take breaks for certain periods of time and return to care when they're ready. And many carers will decide that a specific placement might not be right for their family for a number of reasons. So again, your agency will help support you through those decisions. It's just really important that you are open and honest with them as you have those conversations. We've had a question come through asking, what is the age range in most need of carers at the moment? All of them. Our greatest need is always, or typically, is for primary school age children. So that's where we see the highest number of children coming into care for the first time and needing usually those more stable and longer term placements. But it's important that you're not signing up to foster for children just because it's the age that we need the most of. We want to make sure that it's going to work for your family as well. So if your family is more suited to a specific type, put your hand up for that, because I guarantee you there'll be somebody else that will be able to fill the gaps elsewhere. So there's a great need of foster carers in Victoria at the moment for all ages. So I guarantee you, if you put your hand up, there will be children that will need support within that age range. Another question has come through. When you have school or kinder age children placed with you, will they generally continue with the same school or kinder that they're already attending? Look, wherever possible, children are going to, agencies are going to try to keep children as close to their communities as possible. So as you can imagine, if you've been removed from your family, we're going to try to minimise as many other sort of broken attachments as we can to make sure that you've still got some stability, that's to make sure that the child still has some stability in their life and some familiar faces and places as well. So when you have that initial phone call about a placement, you can talk to the agency about pick up and drop off times, if that's something that you're able to do or not able to do, and the agency can work with you on how best to support that placement. In some cases, the child might move schools to be closer to a caring to their foster family, if it's appropriate to do so, but that would be something that's weighed up on a case-by-case basis for each child. And usually with longer term care, if it's going to be it's going to make things a bit easier in terms of that pick up and drop off in the morning if it's closer to home, or if they've got friends within the community, then that's something that could be considered in moving them to a school closer to their foster family. So I hope that answers that question. Another question here about whether you're allowed to take long-term placements on holidays or weekends away, or is this a scenario where the child will go to a respite carer? That's a really good question. And again, it can be a little bit of a case-by-case scenario. So typically you would need to get permission to take the child on an interstate holiday, but it is something that can be applied for. If it's a weekend away, you know, somewhere out in Victoria exploring our local area, then usually you could get approval to take that child away with you. It's a really great experience for our kids to get a chance to go on holidays and to experience some of that fun with their carers. But again, you just need to get approval from the agency that you're working with, and especially making sure that safety considerations are taken into account. So things like if you're going out to the river to go skiing, things like that, you just need to get approval to make sure that things are going to be safe for that child while they're away with you. Hopefully that answers that question. All right, so do children in foster care have contact with their families, their birth families? The answer to that is yes. Contact plans are determined by the child's case plan or the children's court, and the child or young person's safety is always the priority. So each situation will be assessed individually. The majority of children in foster care will have contact with family unless there's a really good reason that they shouldn't. And most children in foster care will enjoy seeing their families. It's a really important way for them to keep in contact with their culture and their community. And they get a lot of benefit out of seeing a positive relationship between their foster carers and their birth family. So your agency will usually be the ones to facilitate this contact. So they'll be the ones that set up the times and things like that. But for some families, especially where there's long-term care orders in place, that might be something that you can participate in as well. It's really important that you're speaking positively about the child's family when you do speak about them, and that you're helping them with that contact situation however possible. So supporting them, packing their bags, maybe packing some food for them, asking them how their day went, things like that, to make sure that it's a really positive experience to see their families as well. For Aboriginal children, it's especially important to ensure that they have contact with their families and communities, especially if they've been placed with non-Aboriginal carers. Aboriginal children need to remain connected to their family and communities to ensure that sense of belonging and development of their cultural identity. So if you are caring for an Aboriginal child, they may have a cultural care plan which ensures that they have access that they need to maintain those ties to community and culture. So what sort of supports are available to foster carers? Carers will usually be responsible for things like their child's daily activities. So things like transport to and from school, things like helping with homework, as I said, supporting with family contact and things like that. That day-to-day caring is the responsibility of you as a foster carer. But there can be extra supports for things like transports to and from school. So a lot of carers will tell us that if there have been emergencies or unexpected things pop up, that their agencies have been really active in offering extra support. So things like pick up and drop off to and from school. So older children and teenagers might be a bit more independent and able to take public transport or walk to school unaccompanied, but there are other options. So things like hiring transport agencies to do that pick up and drop off, or specific childcare arrangements that can depend on the needs of the child. So all carers are eligible for the childcare rebate, and some might be eligible for the childcare benefit as well. And so after you've already applied for the rebates that you're eligible, the department will pay the gap to cover any additional childcare costs. So your agency will support you with this in terms of things like paying for childcare or school pickup and drop off. Now, there is also a financial reimbursement for being a foster carer. It is a care allowance, it's not a payment, and it's intended to contribute to the range of day-to-day expenses incurred in providing care for a child. So this includes things like clothing, food, basic personal items, transport, pocket money and entertainment, but it is not an income. So it is tax-free and it's provided by the Department of Families, Fairness and Housing. And in general, payments start at just over $400 a fortnight, which is paid pro rata based on how many nights a child is in your care. So it is slightly different for our emergency and respite carers who might only care for a child for a couple of nights at a time. The payment increases depending on the age of the child or young person and the complexity of their needs. And this can sound a little bit hard to calculate, but your agency will provide guidance and extra support when it comes to understanding the care allowance. And you can also find more information about this on the DFFS website to help you understand what that might look like for your family's financial situation. So what about if your lifestyle changes when you're a foster carer? That's really common. People don't live the same lives forever. So you're not expected to know exactly what type of care you are going to provide now until forever. So when you first inquire, your agency will help support you in determining what your preference is. But fostering is really flexible depending on your capacity and the type of care that you're able to provide at the time. So when things change for you, so that could be going back to school or changing your job or adding to your own family, you need to have that conversation with the agency that you work with, and they can talk to you about whether that care type that you're providing needs to change. And as I mentioned earlier, you can of course take a break as well. If your romantic situation changes, you become accredited as a single foster carer and then a new partner comes into your life, your agency will discuss further with you about what that will look like. But your partner, if they are present around the children in your care, it's recommended that you start talking to the agency about ensuring that they're approved and can also receive support from the agency moving forward. Can you foster if you've done IVF? Of course you can. Having an experience with IVF does not disqualify you. What matters most is that you're really transparent with your agency about your family structure, if you're planning to add to the family in the future, or if you have tried in the past and been unsuccessful, which may impact on that accreditation process, and understanding how you can best provide support to young people in foster care. So if you've got kids at home, you might want for them to be involved in the recruitment process with you. We usually recommend that all of the people in the household will attend the training, and that includes all members of the household that are over 18 attending the shared lives training. So if you have teenagers in the home that would like to come along to the training to understand more about what fostering is like or what mum and dad are getting involved in, have a chat to your agency about this, because it can be really beneficial to have your own young people there to hear what's involved, but it's just about making sure that that content is really appropriate for the age. Your kids will need to be a part of the recruitment process. So it's really recommended that your children are included with decision making around welcoming children in care into your home. Excuse me. And so your assessor will have a conversation with them about what fostering is going to look like for your family, and making sure that they understand and agree to everything that you're signing up for. And really important that you talk to them and make sure once you are accredited that everything's going well and that they are also enjoying the process as well. Can people in your support network babysit or look after the children that you're caring for? They absolutely can, and it's really important that you've got a strong natural support network around you as part of your assessment process, but also when you are accredited. So anyone who's going to provide sort of one-on-one supervision to a child without you being there needs to have a check done by the agency. So whether that's police checks and working with children checks will depend on the type of contact that they're having. But it's really important that you consider what your village looks like before you take on caring for a child, because as we know, it does take a village. Same thing as guests. You can absolutely have people come over and spend time in your home, but it's important that you discuss this with your agency again. And again, the agency may need to run relevant police checks and things if needed, just to ensure that the child is safe with everybody who's present in the home at any time. Do we have any other questions coming through? It doesn't look like we have any more questions, so I might get close to wrapping up. But I guess if you're considering foster caring and wondering if foster care is the right thing for you, it's important to understand that any single person can make a really big impact on a child's life. And Victoria needs foster carers now more than ever. So agencies are prioritising safety during COVID-19 to make sure that recruitment happens in a really safe and flexible way. And we know that life is changing at the moment. So things, as I mentioned, your lifestyle can change once you start this accreditation process. It's just important that you chat to your agency about what that will look like for you. You can change your fostering style over the period of time that you're registered. So you can move between respite, emergency, short-term, long-term care. And of course, it does take a village to raise children, and foster carers are a part of that village. So if you think it's something that you might be able to do, please give us a call on 1800 013 088 or reach out on the website as well. We've had another question come through, so I'll respond to that one. If the family member is already a registered kinship carer, will they have to go through the checks still? Yes. All Victorian foster carers have to go through the same checks. So whether you've been a kinship carer in the past and you've gone through the department checks to be registered as a kinship carer, or if you work in a field such as social work, or if you've had a lot of contact with home-based care in the past, you do still have to go through that process in its entirety from start to finish. But the good news is that your agency is there to support you every step of the way. So unlike kinship care, where sometimes you can be sort of figuring it out for yourself and trying to learn things along the way, with foster care, the process is designed to go through step by step from start to finish to help you really understand what's involved in fostering and what the commitment is going to look like, and to make sure that you're safe and suitable to provide foster care to children who are part of the larger community and not related to you or family. So I hope that answers that question. But as I said, if you do have any further questions, if there's anything I can help to answer about your personal circumstances or your family, please give us a call on 1800 013 088 or visit fosteringconnections.com.au. From there, I can have a chat to you about what's involved in fostering, as I said, answer any questions, and also help you find an agency in your local area that can support you through the foster care accreditation process. So we do record these sessions and we will keep them posted for later on. So if you want to revisit this one and make sure you haven't missed out on any parts of it, you can do that. But if there are no other questions, I think we might get close to wrapping up. All right, thanks so much, everyone. Oh, another question's just come through. If you've been a carer in the past, does your registration run out? If you were a carer, if you've been a registered carer, within the past 2 years, your registration might still be applicable. If it's been longer than 2 years, you will need to redo at least some parts of that assessment, but it really does depend on how long ago you were registered. The training has been updated in the last couple of years, so you will at least need to redo that. But if you'd like to chat further about what that would look like for you specifically, please just give us a ring and I can hopefully answer that question. All right, if there are no other questions, I think we are going to wrap things up. Thanks so much, everyone.